The tropics have activated once again after a few weeks off, as we're now tracking a tropical disturbance in the Atlantic that could become our next named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season as it heads towards the Caribbean and the Bahamas over the next few days, and this storm could eventually impact the U.S. There's also finally some more activity in the eastern Pacific as well. Here's a look at the Atlantic. Here's the tropical disturbance right here. It's kind of going to be headed towards the Leeward Islands and then towards some of the Greater Antilles, some of the bigger islands in the Caribbean. And then it's supposed to go somewhere towards the Bahamas, possibly towards further west, towards Florida, or it could go along the East Coast or even out to sea. Then we also have activity in the eastern Pacific, a couple of disturbances. This one over here could actually become a stronger system, and it has a pretty high chance of forming in the next 7 days. And here's the NHC has this disturbance in the Atlantic. It says an area of disturbed weather over the central tropical Atlantic is expected to interact with an approaching tropical wave during the next couple of days, and then a tropical depression could form mid to late week going. So that's going to be basically the kind of the beginning of August, and it has a 0% chance of forming in the next 48 hours, but a 40% chance of the next 7 days. And here's where it's supposed to go. It could go, further west towards Florida, or it could go further out. There's a pretty wide area where it could end up. And then also in the eastern Pacific, there's a couple of disturbances. There's been actually quite a few disturbances in the eastern Pacific, but most of them haven't been able to do anything. But this one actually has a 20% chance of forming in the next 48 hours and a 70% chance of the next 7 days. The Atlantic has been pretty quiet over the past few weeks, and part of that is because of, extreme amounts of Saharan dust, and it's still there, but a bit less intense. And so, there's the possibility that this disturbance could actually manage to get through some of that dust as this main kind of, this huge wave of dust kind of moves further west. And there's even dust getting all the way into the eastern Pacific. So that's a lot of dust. I think it was possibly record amounts of Saharan dust. And then there's even more coming, but the whole idea is that maybe that this disturbance has a slight chance to get through some of this, but the shear is also a little bit above average actually in the Caribbean. So that if this is probably gonna this goes up and down, so if it goes back down, then it'll be more favorable, but it's still slightly in the unfavorable kind of amount of shear for the Caribbean and even the tropical Atlantic. So, we'll see what happens with that. Here's the GFS showing this disturbance. This is where it's supposed to be, and the GFS, notice that the GFS doesn't really show much of anything with this, and then finally it turns into a tropical depression or tropical storm kind of as it gets towards the Big Bend of Florida or even the Florida Panhandle, but then it starts intensifying off the East Coast, but then it starts becoming more of an extra tropical system. But, notice there's still a lot of dry air behind it, but where the storm is, there is more moisture with it. But here's kind of where this could try developing, but notice there's a lot of shear. So if there's too much shear, this is not going to do anything, and this is the GFS is showing a ton of shear over where the storm is supposed to be. So there's that. And then apparently as it gets closer to Florida, the shear drops. So and then it forms pretty quickly. But then once it's off the East Coast, there's still pretty low shear until it starts becoming an extra tropical system off the East Coast. So that's what the GFS is showing. It's been pretty consistent not showing this doing much of anything at all. it's showing more activity in the eastern Pacific, but the Atlantic still really not showing anything with even this disturbance. And the idea is that there's this, the big high pressure in the Atlantic is going to basically steer this somewhere between, it's going to end up somewhere between here and here. So, like, basically, they're pretty confident that this is going to kind of go across the northern Caribbean, and then it either turns as far west as Florida, or it goes along the southeast coast of the U.S., or it even just kind of stays out to sea a little bit. So there's quite a bit of spread on where this could actually end up. But the Euro models kind of trended down a bit on this too, because they were showing a pretty decent, like, tropical storm, even a hurricane kind of forming pretty quickly. But now they've actually pushed this back, so they've actually trended down with this, and they don't really show much of anything until it kind of reaches the southeastern US. So it kind of trends up and down, but if it keeps trending down, this might not even do much of anything, because there's still a ton of this, Saharan dust. So this one might not even do anything, but we'll see. It could, and this one looks like there's more potential than some of the others, but there's actually pretty low shear with this according to the Euro, but still not doing much of anything until it reaches kind of the southeastern US. So there's that. And then the CMC model not really showing much of anything until it gets close to Florida, and then it starts intensifying pretty quickly. If it were to get close to Florida, I think it would have a decent potential to really intensify pretty quick, because the sea surface temperatures off the west coast of Florida especially are very much above average, like even close to like 90 degrees. So yeah, but this, so we'll see what happens with this storm. It may or may not form into anything. Like we'll have to see. But what we pretty much know is supposed to happen is some more activity in the eastern Pacific. We actually have, this is the GFS showing that by the beginning of August, by August 1st really, we could have a hurricane in the eastern Pacific, and then it gets pretty intense for a day or two, and then it kind of goes away. And then the GFS is also showing behind that an even stronger system. This is now, I think, wow, this could be pretty extreme. Like, this is showing, the GFS is showing a Category 4 hurricane in the eastern Pacific, a huge hurricane by August 7th, and this is still like 10 days out, so this could change too, but it actually has been really consistent on showing an intense hurricane over the past few runs at this point. So it does look like the eastern Pacific is heating up, but and the Atlantic is also heating up too, but still it doesn't look like there's going to be a bunch of activity yet. And then this is the Euro kind of showing tropical cyclone activity, and this is showing a pretty decent chance of something happening. This is showing kind of over the Bahamas and kind of the southeastern US, showing the potential, pretty high potential, I guess 50% at least, for a tropical storm along the southeast, and then it kind of goes along the east coast or just offshore the east coast of the eastern US. This could form into something, but then they're showing a slight chance that it even becomes a hurricane on the Euro. The Euro ensembles are showing, really weak storm going into, August 1st, and then pretty much it's going to go just north of the Leeward Islands and the Greater Antilles, like Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, all these places, and then it goes towards the Bahamas. And then, now a lot of the ensembles on the Euro are turning this out, so you have that huge high pressure, and then it really starts, turning most of these out to sea, because, it could go, like, towards the Carolinas, or it might even just totally miss the eastern U.S. completely, but it kind of does look like they're trying to show it kind of close to North Carolina as the most likely scenario on the Euro model ensembles, but it doesn't even show it intensifying that much. There are some ensembles that do show it really intensifying, but for a while it stays pretty weak until it gets towards the Bahamas and then starts approaching the U.S. And this is still like, at least this is still basically, a week out, a week to 10 days out. So, a lot can change, and we'll see what happens. The GEFS really shows a whole bunch of nothing. The GFS, the main GFS wasn't really showing anything, and the GEFS kind of ensembles are really showing nothing with this disturbance. So that makes it seem like, this may or may not do anything. They're showing this one is showing, a tropical wave, and then it could turn into something, but then, you notice a lot of activity in the eastern Pacific, that's for sure, but then the Atlantic, not really exciting until, you get towards later August, but then you have some of these storms are going out to sea, so maybe more fish storms. So, that's interesting. Definitely looks like the eastern Pacific is heating up, and the Atlantic a little bit, but, most of this activity is going to be in the eastern Pacific, which is interesting because, the Atlantic, it's started off not extremely active, but then we had the, record-breaking Category 5 Hurricane Beryl in the Atlantic, and then now it's been pretty quiet. And then also we had the latest start to an East Pacific hurricane season. There's just completely no activity, and then this is still the least active Eastern Pacific season. Now the GFS is showing all this activity in the Eastern Pacific and not much in the Atlantic. And this is the MJO kind of 40-day forecast, and it shows basically still a neutral to slightly unfavorable phase over the Pacific and the Atlantic, but then it does get more favorable over the Pacific, especially August 2nd and August 7th, August 12th, and also slightly favorable over the Atlantic, then not as intensely favorable as what it was showing previously, and then so it's really, trended down on even how favorable this could be, and then it's neutral even like August 17th, August 22nd, it's neutral, and then starts going back towards slightly unfavorable. That'll be interesting to see, because this would be going into the beginning of September, which should be going towards the peak of hurricane season. I think that there will probably be some activity, some hurricanes in the Atlantic, even if it's unfavorable, like, at the peak of hurricane season, there should be something. And even the Global Tropics Hazards Outlook shows, this was week 2, July 31st to August 6th. This was issued a few days ago, but still basically showing, a high chance of something forming in the Eastern Pacific. That's what, what we're seeing with some of those disturbances. But then in the Atlantic, in the Caribbean, a low chance of something forming. And then also continuing into August 7th to August 13th, both the Pacific could have some activity and the Atlantic. We'll have to see what happens because, there's a chance that something happens, but, right now it doesn't look that favorable. But it probably will get a lot more favorable going towards September. That's what climatologically will usually happen because, there's still, a lot of the hurricane season to go, and there's, the sea surface temperatures are definitely warm. Everything's ready for a lot of activity. You have the 26 degrees Celsius temperatures going across most of the Atlantic that would see hurricanes. Temperatures are high enough to intensify hurricanes, and then you have, pretty much temperatures approaching 90 degrees, especially around Florida, and then this is 30 degrees Celsius, which is like 86 degrees, so you're going upper 80s, close to 90, especially around Florida, the west coast of Florida, especially in South Florida. Definitely extreme sea surface temperatures. And also an interesting thing is that the Enso is still actually Enso neutral, but actually the temperatures are actually sort of not coming back up, but a little bit. Like, it got down to like 0.1 degrees above average, but now we're back up to like 0.4 degrees. So that's interesting because that's, 0.5 degrees would be going back to a weak El Nino. So the La Nina isn't really happening, but I think this is probably gonna go down again and go into a still Enso neutral, but a bit cooler. So the La Nina that was supposed to kind of start happening during the hurricane season, not really happening. So that could also impact the hurricane season as, making it not as intense as it could have been, but still with these, record warm sea surface temperatures, there should still be a lot of activity. Yeah, the sea surface temperatures are way above average. Just, the sea surface temperatures, and then the upper ocean heat content is pretty high. Like, you're seeing some that's like probably approaching like 200 on this, on the map. And especially in the Caribbean, this is kind of where Hurricane Beryl went through. But still, there's still a ton of ocean heat content there. And, now you have, like, just this entire Caribbean is on fire with the ocean heat content for hurricanes. And, it's way above where it should be. And this is, there is still quite a bit of the hurricane season to go because, this is going towards, it's July 28th. This is, we're going towards August, and this is where the hurricane season is supposed to start, really ramping up in August. And then September, is the peak, of course, early to mid-September, and then it starts coming down, but we're actually, to not have that much activity right now is normal for this, this time, this early in the season. And, so even August 1st is basically like, kind of like November 1st. So not having that much activity is fine, but then, it is supposed to quickly ramp up. Like, really by mid-August, so we'll have to see what happens over the next couple weeks. As mid-August approaches, then it should really start ramping up climatologically, but, every season's going to be slightly different. And then the Eastern Pacific, though, has been, way below average. Like, there's supposed to have been a lot of activity, and really we've only gotten 2 named storms, no hurricanes, and these 2 named storms were really short-lived. Now the models are really showing the eastern Pacific heating up, and with several hurricanes, potentially major hurricanes, and really it's like August, September, October, it's all the same with having up and down activity. But so far the Atlantic is actually ranked as the 3rd most active season in terms of the accumulated cyclone energy. Most of that is because of Hurricane Beryl. It got all the way up to like the number 1 most active season, ahead of 2005. Now it's kind of slipped back down. Now it's at the 3rd most active, but it's still way above average, way above where it should be. And then the activity is supposed to start coming back over the next couple weeks, probably, but that's what it's supposed to do. And then the Eastern Pacific is at the bottom, like way below where it should be. And so, I think we could get this up a bit higher with some of the big hurricanes that are being forecasted, but still it's going to be one of the least active hurricane seasons in East Pacific hurricane history, But, yeah, so we'll have to see what happens over the next couple weeks. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button, share the video, comment below, and please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already for more weather information. Extreme Weather Zone, out.